So I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Jen, who I worked with back in the United States for several years. She moved from the United States to she moved from the U.S. to Senegal a year ago after living in Mali. She lives there with her husband and three children, and she was gracious enough to grant me a few minutes to ask her some questions about living overseas. So Jen, first off, thanks for joining me, and tell me how you decided to make the move from the U.S. And why.
Thanks for having me. My husband and I had been talking about living overseas since college for years, and we were, I guess, a little bit hesitant. Right out of college, we wanted a couple years experience working, and his career, which is in international development, required that he spend some time going to difficult places to go with a partner. So for many years, I was in DC, and he would head off to all sorts of crazy places to gain experience in emergency management and helping in the developing world. Once we had our first child, Max, who's now 9, we really kept bringing up the conversation, and as he got older and we had more children, it became clear that there was never going to be a perfect time, and we just had to go ahead and do it. So after the birth of our youngest child, he started looking in earnest for opportunities to take an overseas position with the family.
And you've been overseas now for how many years?
This is our second year overseas together. We first went last August. We first went to Bamako, which is the capital of Mali in West Africa, and we had an amazing experience there. Unfortunately, they had a military coup there in mid-March, and so the kids and I were evacuated in early April. Fred remained there, and we decided to move over to Dakar, which is a neighboring country, in August, and he took another position in the same company that he's with.
Great. So give me a sense of what your typical day is like in Senegal.
Oh, it's great here. Wake up, get the kids off to school. My youngest goes to a half-day French preschool. She's 3.5. My 2 older boys are enrolled in an international school here. And so drop the kids off, and then I come back and have a couple hours to do whatever. Go walk down to the fruit and vegetable market to buy produce for the day. Head over to where at Dakar, Senegal was a former French colony, so you don't just kind of go to a big grocery store to buy everything. Right. You go to one place to buy your bread, another place to buy your meat, and most of it is within walking distance. So, at least once a week, if not twice a week, I spend a couple hours in the morning just kind of shopping around for the things that we need at home. Mind you, I'm not home washing the floors or any of that, because in a country like this, it's somewhat expected that if you're coming in as a foreigner, you're going to support the economy by hiring local staff.
Right.
So something that was not something we could afford in the U.S. is having a housekeeper that comes in every day, and cleans up. I'm also really involved with a group called Dakar Women's Group. It's an English-speaking group, but it has women from every nationality you can imagine. And while it's social, it's committed to charity. And I played an active role on the charity committee. And so that's going out to the outskirts, to villages, to different areas, and we have different projects set up that I assist with. So I'm active with the Dakar Women's Group. on the board of my kids' international school and active in the PTO. So I'm doing what I've wanted to do, which is be an active part of my kids' life while they're young, be involved in their school, be involved in the community here. We live in a fantastic neighborhood where the children play in the street, playing soccer, and evenings are typically everyone's hanging out together outside. I see the ocean every day. So a typical day is just sort of the normal everyday things. Drop the kids off at school, pick them up. In the meantime, I'm doing various things.
I know in Panama, it's the one thing that I noticed that you just mentioned, which I found much different, is kids are outside all the time.
Yes.
They're not sitting around playing. Well, I mean, they do some of that too, but sitting around playing iPads and PS3s and things like that. They do that, but it just seems that a lot more than, at least when I was up in the U.S., kids are just outside all the time, which I think is where kids need to be.
Yeah, the weather here is fantastic, and mind you, I don't mind warm climates, so not everyone may agree with me, but I think the weather is fantastic pretty much almost year round. We swim all the time. We play outside all the time. And while we do have internet access, we do have television here, the power is inconsistent. And so we're not tied to email. We're not tied to the television or video games because it may work or it may not work. And, rather than getting worked up about it, let's just go outside and have fun.
Right.
There's an adjustment when you move to another place. It's a big adjustment to sort of take a step back and not be as tied to technology as we're used to in the U.S.
So, in your experience, what's the most rewarding thing about giving your children the expat or the overseas or the moving abroad experience?
It's changed our family for the better. For one thing, we're not living a lavish lifestyle, but we can afford for me to not need to work full time.
Sure.
Which is what I was doing in the U.S. So it's been my preference that while the kids are at the age that they are, that I am available to them all the time, and that's what this life has given us. It's given my kids an opportunity to see what the rest of the world looks like.
Right.
And to me, that is our future. We're no longer going to be Americans and French and Italian. We are going to be global citizens. And it's starting with our generation, but even more so as our kids start to grow up and given technology and everything else, it's going to be critical that they're exposed to other cultures, other languages. One of the things that I found immediately in the international school system is that your classmates are coming from everywhere.
Right.
So there's immediate understanding of cultural differences, of patience with cultural differences, of openness to those that are not like you.
Right. So what is the most challenging thing of living abroad? I mean, living in the U.S., everything is convenient. That's not the case. I can tell you that's not the case even here in Panama. And there are challenges. What would you say are some of the more challenging things of living abroad?
In Dakar, I would say the challenge is that you can only get so much done in a day. And coming from a very fast-paced life that I was living in DC, the idea that I can't check 10 things off my to-do list, no matter how efficient I want to be, because it's not in my control, has been the biggest growth experience for me. I've really had to take a step back and say, well, what's going to happen if this has to wait till tomorrow?
Right.
And I remember, if there's a thunderstorm and you lose power for a couple hours in the U.S., everybody's going crazy. Here, it's an almost daily occurrence, and you're like, oh yeah, we're not going to have power for a couple hours. All right, let me go. So what do I need to do to prepare for it? Oh, I heard we're not going to have water this weekend because they're messing with the pipes, or there's not been enough rainfall. So, what do I need to prepare for that? So it's the greatest challenge has been a personal one of really learning patience and taking a step back. The other piece of it is, you are far from family. So when you have kids, while we're giving them this fantastic experience, we're also missing our family that's behind. Skype, email, all of those things really help that. I'm sure it was much harder, a generation ago.
Sure.
But, when there is a family crisis or something, it's hard to be far away.
So net, how would you compare your quality of life now versus your quality of life before you moved abroad?
There's no question that we are incredibly happy now. I don't want to take that away from the fact that we were very happy when we were in the U.S., but we knew that was not the lifestyle we wanted for our kids, that we wanted to raise them overseas and give them that experience. So as much as, we were happy in the U.S., this is a million times better. And this is not just let's try it out for a year or two. This is our future. So you think this is long term for you? Maybe not just in Senegal, but living abroad is now a lifestyle choice. Yes. Yeah. The education that my kids are getting here is just they couldn't get anywhere else. So
Jen, share with me, and if you can recall, what's your craziest expat experience that you've had living either in Senegal or in Mali or?
Let me think. Craziest experience. Well, I'll tell you, the first week we arrived in Dakar, they had massive rains that caused flooding. And so we're in this great little house that has all tile floor. And as is typical, the water, when it's a bad storm, kind of drips through the sides of all the windows because they're not so well insulated. So there's kind of a stream of water on the tile, and my oldest son goes cruising along the tile, falls, and cracks his chin open. Well, you walk outside our house, and it's a dirt road, and it's just completely flooded. So the clinics are typical. The clinics that are known to be really good are not remotely. The streets aren't passable to get there. So my husband takes him and had to go to 3 or 4 places through the flooded streets before he could even find something that was open that could put in a couple stitches.
Wow.
And looking back on it, that 24-hour period, he cut his chin. It wasn't a huge deal. He needed a couple stitches. But in that moment, it was all these different things coming together. And it's like, what do you mean you can't drive through the street? I mean, don't they have drainage here? I mean, really, there's like large pieces of, wood and stuff just streaming down. You could have gone water skiing on the roads here. So, that was sort of our introduction to Dakar.
So it's not like, and that's one of the convenience issues, obviously. I mean, and we have the same thing here in Panama. If the kid if one of the kids falls and bumps his head or needs a few stitches. I mean, we're 30 minutes away from from good health care, and you don't just call an ambulance, and 911 doesn't, there is no 911. But how is the health care?
We do a lot of it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the healthcare is okay here. Generally speaking, if it was something serious, we would probably leave to get, if there's surgery or something like that. We probably wouldn't stay. At the same time, people have babies here, people have surgeries here. It's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So any other advice for families that are considering moving overseas?
I would say if you're considering moving to a place like Senegal, we found it particularly easy to make the transition because my husband already had a job.
Right.
So we weren't coming and then having to find that source of income. He had a job here. We came. That immediately made one thing that we could check off the list. And then the other thing that I would say is when you do make the move, identify a couple things that have special meaning to the kids that you bring with you. And so during those initial couple months, they've sort of got that comfort. I'll tell you, when you first come, you've got about a week or two of just being completely elated and high. We did it. We made it. This is awesome. Oh, and, look at what these people on the street are wearing. And, oh, do you hear the awesome music down the street? And this is just going to be fantastic. And then, life happens. The water stops running. The sink breaks. This happens, that happens. And you're kind of going to probably a 3 to 6 month. What the heck did we do? Are we crazy? This child, is unhappy with the food, and this child doesn't like this, and, what are we doing to ourselves? It was so much easier where we were. And if you can find a support system to get you over that lump of, oh my gosh, what's going on here, then it's smooth sailing. And for me, it was finding a women's group. My husband works. He has a regional position, and so he does have to travel a lot to other countries. And so for me, it was meeting people at the school and meeting people in the local community so that I could have a support system when things weren't going so well.
Sure. And that these are expats primarily, or they're expats and locals, or?
They're expats and locals, but locals who are in the business community who are wealthy enough to afford to send their child to an international school or participate in one of these businesses or groups.
Well, that's great, Jen. This is fantastic. I really appreciate your time. I lived in Africa as well, and so I'm very familiar with the power outages for sure. And yeah, it can get challenging at times, but it sounds like it's been a really great experience for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.